Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the Pulse with BP. I'm your host, Billy Parvatam. Folks, I'm so excited today to be joined by a really awesome guest. He's none other than Mr. Joe Davis. Joe is the television voice of the Los Angeles Dodgers. He also works for Fox Sports. He's already accomplished a lot in his career so far, and I'm really glad to be joined by him today. Joe, thank you so much for joining me.
You got it, Billy.
Awesome. Well, first of all, I wanted to ask you, how's it been like to work in this pandemic? I mean, like everybody, our work and lives were thrown off by this pandemic when it started back in March. I know that's affected you in the broadcast booth, calling both baseball and football now for Fox Sports. I mean, how can you describe what it's been like to work during this pandemic?
Totally different. I think that there are a few ways to look at it. The first is, thank God we have games to call, right? I mean, we went a few months without having anything. So uh, what we're doing right now beats that, but it's totally different, especially the games that we're doing from studio. So like I did Georgetown Butler basketball yesterday in Indy, but from the studio in LA. You hate it, right? Part of what you love about calling games is actually being at the games and being in the environment. Missing out on that, it stinks. But at the same time, I was home for dinner after doing a game in Indianapolis, in Los Angeles. So, I mean, there's some good things, there's some bad things. It's definitely different. And I do hope that it gets back to normal sooner rather than later in terms of us being at the games, even if that means having to travel to Indy and not getting back for dinner.
Do you think, though, that some of these changes will be permanent once we do return to normal post-pandemic? I mean, it seems like it's a lot more efficient for some of these networks to just keep you guys in a studio or maybe give you some equipment at home and call these games. Do you think in some aspects some of this stuff will stay post-coronavirus?
I do, yeah, and it scares all of us to think about how much might stay like this. It's my hope that all the big games are going to be done the right way. I completely understand the other side of it, though. Completely understand the finances of it. But I do think that there will be things that are done during this pandemic and that we learn about during this pandemic that do stick around because I mean, it's kind of like, if you don't want to get chores around the house, you shouldn't do them too well the first time that your parents ask you to do them or that your wife or husband asks you to do them because they're going to ask you to do it again. Well, I think that networks are proving that their technicians and their engineers are pretty incredible at what they do, making it seem in a lot of cases way more normal than it should seem with guys calling games out of their house or calling it from studio.
Yeah, that's definitely some great points to take into consideration. I want to go back to more happier times, Joe. You attended Beloit College, and I was interesting to find this out about you. You played QB for the football team and also broadcast for the baseball team. I mean, how'd you manage both doing those things?
Yeah, I've always been kind of obsessive about time management. I guess that was out of necessity a little bit there. I would schedule my days right down to the minute between playing football and, like you said, broadcasting the basketball games. But I also started my own business when I was there and ran that. I was in a fraternity, uh, lady that is now my wife. I met while I was in college, went to different colleges, but had a long-term relationship going. So the real life stuff that was in there too. I would script my day seriously down to like the minute, just to fit everything in. And I think that you hope that in college you're learning some life skills, right, beyond just what you're learning in the books and in the classroom. And for me, that was definitely a place where I learned how to manage my time. And I find now that I'm an old and wise 33-year-old, that time is the most valuable thing. So to know how to manage it, that's a skill that I think is a valuable one.
You've made many stops over your broadcast career. You worked for ESPN. You've worked high school sports. You worked in minor league baseball. And I wanted to go there because you used to call games for the Montgomery Biscuits. And I found talking to professional broadcasters that the best stories they have are from minor league baseball. So, what are some of your favorite memories working in Montgomery?
Yeah, it was awesome, man. I joke around with people. That's when I knew I had made it. When I was announcing for a team whose mascot was a biscuit with eyes and a slab of butter for its tongue. Like, I've arrived, man. Where else is there to go? Geez, just the grind of it and the fact that there might have been 30 people listening, but it didn't matter. I was announcing baseball and getting paid to do it, and just the excitement that came with that, with being fresh out of college and being the voice of a team like I'd always dreamt of being. And now looking back on it and seeing these guys in the majors that I was covering there, it's really cool. I remember seeing Giancarlo Stanton when he was Mike Stanton hit a home run over our scoreboard in Montgomery, and then got called up to the majors straight from Double-A the next day. And we had pitching staffs that were awesome in Montgomery: Chris Archer and Matt Moore and Alex Cobb and Alex Torres, Jake McGee, all these guys who have become big leaguers that came through there. So yeah, so many good memories. But I would not be where I am now without having had those few years in Montgomery. And I always tell young broadcasters when they're starting their careers, go do minor league baseball, because there's nowhere else you can go to get that amount of reps.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely some great stories to hear. So, how did this opportunity open up with the Dodgers? That's where you currently are now, your most known association. How did it open to come up to LA?
Uh, I still don't totally know, to be honest with you. I don't know how. Remember when my agent called for the first time and mentioned that my name had come up. This was probably 2014, fall of 2014. They were starting to think about, life after Vin in the broadcast booth and what that would look like. And he asked me to have a baseball reel put together, and we put something together pretty quickly, but I didn't think much of it. It obviously became something bigger than we had anticipated. Still don't totally know how the Dodgers found out about me or how I got on their radar, because at that point I had done 2 Major League Baseball games. I had done a few more by the time the deal was finalized. I think about 2 years from then before we finally completely locked it in. But man, I'm very lucky that somebody heard, and I guess that's a good lesson as you're doing games where you feel like nobody's listening or that nobody's watching, that you never know when that person that could change your life, a decision maker that could change your career trajectory, is tuned in, and you are making an impression. You just never know.
For sure. And Joe, obviously you've had an impressive career in your own right, but I think a lot of people, when they know you, or maybe if they Google you, one of the first things that might come up will be the guy that replaced arguably the greatest sportscaster of all time, Vin Scully. I mean, how does that make you feel to know that that will be attached to your career? Are you frustrated by it at all? If you're proud of it, I mean, how do you kind of handle, hey, you had to follow a legend in Vin Scully?
Yeah, I think that going into taking the job, there were people that said, well, "You're dead man walking." Nobody wants to be the guy that replaces the guy, and I get it, right? Like, you're right, but I wasn't going to not take the job because of that. And then 10 years and 50 years from now, look back and said, "Man, I wonder what could have been." So I looked at it the other way. Yeah, responsibility, right, to replace the greatest ever to do it, but it was also for me what made it special. And I wasn't out there looking for a job with a team. This was just a unique opportunity that I couldn't turn down. And it was unique and it was special because of Vin. So to be that guy, that's what makes this job so meaningful in a lot of ways. And um, if I had a nickel for every time I heard something about replacing Vin or big shoes to fill, I'd be a very rich man right now. But I knew getting into it that was part of the deal, and that always will be part of the deal in this position, and that will always be what partially makes it special.
Did you feel personal any pressure, any nervousness going into a job, or was it one of those things where once you start doing games, that stuff all goes away?
Yeah, definitely nerves, and I think it would have been easy to feel pressure, but I try to channel all that context positively and look at it again kind of like a responsibility. And we're just talking semantics, I guess, but when I thought of it as a responsibility as opposed to a pressure packed position, it allowed me to be me. And I just tried to work hard and be prepared, but be myself, and embrace the idea that I was following the greatest ever to do it as what made it special, and not look at it as, oh God, I've got to try and replace Vin, or I've got to be Vin. The team has won a lot of games and that's helped, but I think just me allowing myself to be me and not putting pressure on myself has also been a reason why I've not been run out of town yet.
Well, that's definitely great for sure. Do you guys keep in touch at all? I mean, does he send you a message every once in a while, or is he kind of fully, for the most part, removed himself from the Dodgers and you've kind of been able to just do your own thing?
Yeah, I think that he tried to make it like that for me. And part of it is he was in the spotlight for so long, and especially at the end. So 67 years of doing that job, and for the last decade of it, he was a big story, and everybody wanted a piece of Vin. And I think that he finished the 67 years, and he said, "I'm going to pull back, and I'm just going to enjoy life at home for a while." And I don't think that I would love to have him in my ear and on the phone and every day and learn from him. But I think that he looked at that as he wouldn't want to be in my way. I think is kind of the way he looked at it. So he gave me some wonderful advice when I first got started, but he's just kind of let me do my thing. And he's been able to pull back and get some well-earned, well-deserved time at home. And unfortunately, his wife, Sandy, just passed away in this last week, but he was able to get away and spend some great time with her in her last years.
Yeah, for sure. And it's been well documented. You've got a great relationship with your broadcast partner, Orel Hershiser. I mean, how do you describe what that relationship is like, both professionally and personally? And I guess a lot of people just don't realize that you spend more time with Orel, probably more than any of
Yeah.
your family members. I mean, most of the year.
Yeah, yeah, you're totally right, Billy. And I think the best way to put it is that outside of my parents and my wife, he's the most impactful person I've ever had in my life. So, not just good buddies. I think that a lot of broadcast partners are good buddies, and you better get along if you're going to be doing baseball and spending 150 nights a year together, and people are listening to you hang out. But it's a step even above that. It's a step above best friends. It's something more than that. It's a step above mentor and pupil. I mean, he is the biggest reason for the job going the way that it is, and him and his wife Dana are the biggest reasons that my family is happy out here. So what you hear on the air is hopefully a reflection of that, and it's real, it's genuine, the love we have for each other, and that we have the shared love we have for baseball. That's all real, and I don't think you can fake stuff in baseball because of the length of the season.
That's awesome. What's your favorite place to travel around the big leagues? I mean, you obviously have some great ballparks in your own division in the NL West, but
Yeah.
do you have any favorite ball? If you do you have a favorite ballpark, whether it's the actual stadium or a favorite city you like to travel to?
Yeah, I think there's separate questions, right? Favorite ballpark and favorite city to travel to, because so much of what we enjoy in this business outside of the sports is the restaurants and what we do, as far as meals when we get a rare opportunity to do that when we get to a city. So I'm a old ballpark guy. I grew up going to games at Wrigley, so I love Wrigley Field, love Fenway. In our division, I love San Francisco in terms of the ballparks. Love the restaurants in Chicago. Love the restaurants in New York. So I guess that would the one place I repeated there would be Chicago. Love going to Chicago. It's the place that I spent quite a bit of time in when I was in college at Beloit. Would drive through Chicago on the way back and forth from home in Michigan. Have a lot of friends who are from Chicago, so that's right up at the top of my list, along with New York. And I guess that's two really easy answers.
That's for sure. And it's interesting because you also you called Dodger games for Fox Sports, and most notably,
Mhm.
you called Game 7 of the NLCS this past season when Joe Buck had a NFL assignment he had to do. I mean, is it weird for you calling Dodger games on a network level? I mean, I'm sure that had to take some adjustment time for you. And how do you kind of manage that going into a broadcast like Game 7 with the Dodgers trying to make it to the World Series after a couple of years when they weren't able to get it done?
It is a little weird. I think I've done enough of it now where it's not as big of a deal as it maybe was at the beginning. It's different. I'm not going to call the game exactly the same way I do when it's me and Oral on Dodger broadcasts. But I think that when we get into this business, and it's no different for you, we're pros, right? We know how to handle it. There are some subtle things that I have to kind of remind myself of. I may, on a Dodger broadcast, call a guy by his first name. Somebody like Kenley Jansen, we may refer to him now and then as Kenley. I wouldn't do that on a Fox broadcast. But as far as like getting excited for the Braves in that Game 7 you're talking about, or toning it down a notch for the Dodgers, I don't want to say it's second nature, but it's not difficult. It's doing the job. We know how to do the job, and we know what adjustments that requires from what we do on the day to day on a local broadcast.
That's definitely some great perspective for sure. I was wondering, Joe, how do you prepare for a game? I mean, let's say it's game 40 of the season. Dodgers are playing the Padres, for the first of a 3-game series. I mean, what is
Mhm.
your prepreration like going into that series? How do you prepare to broadcast 3 games, knowing you've got to come up with, interesting stories and tidbits to entertain the viewers?
Yeah, there's a lot of answers to that. I guess the first thing is a lot goes into the preparation in the off season. So I'll take a month or two where I don't touch any kind of baseball, but I'm actually getting close to the part of the calendar where I'll start going through all the teams in the division, all the players on those teams, and updating my pages on those guys, and refreshing my notes, doing a full thorough Google search to see what articles are out there, what stories have come out in the last year, and updating those pages. So then, you mentioned the Padres, they're in the division. So I'll start working on the Padres, say on Monday, and I'll spend a couple weeks just learning, refreshing my notes on all those guys, creating new notes. You Darvish and Blake Snell coming over, learn about those guys. The infielder they got from Korea, I'll build a page on him. And so when we see the Padres for the first time, I'll be able to go to those pages I've created in the winter and have that foundation, have that starting point. Start of a series is always extra busy because you're catching up on what's important now, what's happened coming up to this point in the season. And games in the division are always easier because we see them 19 times a year. So you become very familiar with the teams in the division. Cubs coming to town or Braves coming to town, you're only going to see them twice a year. That requires a little more digging, a little more updating. And typically I will do the same thing I do for the teams in the division in the offseason. I'll do that as we approach a series with the team outside of the division once we get into the year. And then, just in covering the team that you are the announcer for, you kind of live it, right? Because you're doing the game every single night. And so being around the team and having called every single game, that's a big part of the preparation going into game 40, as you referenced.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess kind of going off of that, I mean, that had to have been impacted, right, by this past season. I mean, because you can't travel with the team. It might be hard to kind of, go to the cage. And I'm not even sure if that was allowed for you guys and talk to guys. I'm sure that your
No,
prep had to be somewhat impacted by this past season.
completely. We didn't travel. We did the road games from our home booth off monitors, and we weren't allowed on the field. So we would drive to the stadium and get out of our car, walk to the booth, call the game, walk back to the car. That was it. There was no interaction with anybody in uniform. So it definitely impacted it. Hopefully it was subtle enough where people at home didn't feel like there was a drop off in what we were bringing. But Orel and I had multiple conversations like, gosh, we're just not very interesting. There's not much depth to what we're doing right now. Like we're too numbers based, and this is not interesting stuff. But you're handicapped when you can't be around the guys. So much of what makes our broadcasts good on a given night, and I think anybody would tell you this, is those nuggets that you pick up around the cage that people at home can't get. Anybody at home can read about the numbers on a guy, and like in a season like this and a setup like that, there's not a whole lot we can bring that the people at home, if they really want to find it, can't find themselves. So that's another reason. I mean, that's the biggest reason why we all hope that it goes back to normal very soon.
For sure. And of course, the team you work for, the Dodgers, ended up winning the World Series this year. What was that like for you to see that? And was it bittersweet at all? Because first of all, you weren't on the call when they won the World Series, so I'm sure as a broadcaster, that's a little bittersweet for you. And then it just didn't feel the same, right? I'm assuming just because we're in COVID. I mean, it's not like you were packed in front of fans in the stadium. I mean, I'm sure even though they won and you were happy about that, for you personally, it had to be a little bittersweet.
Yeah, you nailed it. I think for any TV broadcaster, it's going to be like that. You're there every step of the way through the season, but then you don't get to do what you love to do once the postseason rolls around. So there is a disconnected feeling. And I think especially because this was in Texas and, World Series in the past, I was at least at the games, taking them in pretty much as a fan. So definitely a disconnected feeling, but a happy feeling nonetheless for the people that we develop personal relationships with, manager, the coaches, the players, and being happy for those guys to finally get what they had been so close to getting a couple times recently.
For sure. And you also work, football games now in the fall. So it's not like you really have a true off season when you're not doing anything. I mean, how much of an adjustment period is it for you? Because you're working baseball, 162 games and it's such a slow pace. And then all of a sudden you're working football. Is there an adjustment period for you that first game? Does it take, 10, 15 minutes into the broadcast? Or by the time you get there, you already kind of have a good sense of the pace and back to being adjusted normally?
Yeah, I think that I'm able to kind of flip the switch in my mind as I go from sport to sport. It's invigorating though when you get that, you're in the dog days of the baseball season once football gets going. So that's a nice jolt end of August, beginning of September to get the excitement that comes with football. Where it gets difficult is just the idea of doing uh, baseball game Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, flying to football Friday, doing the football game Saturday, back on baseball Sunday, it becomes a lot to balance. But it's also like I'm very quick to remind myself, shoot, you told me 5 years ago that this could be your setup, you would have jumped at it in a minute. So it's very easy to keep perspective on how lucky I am to be doing that, even when it does get to be a lot prep wise.
And speaking of that, I mean, I'm guessing you probably work maybe 200 nights a week, 200 nights a year rather. I mean, when you talk
Yeah.
about all the, baseball games, you talk about spring training games, maybe you get a postseason game, the NFL game. So you definitely work a lot, and that's not to even mention the prep work you do outside of your game days. I mean, so when you're not working, Joe, what are some things you like to do in your free time?
Just spend as much time as I can with my family. And because of the idea, like you said, that you're gone so often and 200 days a year, you're doing games. What helps is I'm kind of a boring guy. I don't have like a bunch of hobbies or anything. I've got my job and then I've got my family. We like to cook food and, have nice meals. And we love going out to restaurants when you're able to do that. But I don't have a whole lot else that pulls me. And I'm not a golfer. I don't have like a boat or anything like that. I'm a pretty simple guy. The family, the job, and uh, food. So it's pretty easy once I get that free time to know what to devote it to.
I've heard you enjoy grilling though. Is there a favorite food you like to grill?
The holy grail would be brisket, the low and slow brisket smoke. So I'm actually going to do one on Monday for the college football national championship, bring a couple guys over to the house. So that's my favorite to do.
That's awesome. And Joe, this is one question I really wanted to ask you. I mean, the realities of this pandemic. It's affected everybody, including young broadcasters like myself. So what's your advice to guys like us who want to get in a business, which is already tough to begin with, but now have to navigate the realities of this pandemic?
Yeah, I hate it. I hate it for you guys and for the industry and for all of us. It's a crappy time for all of us, relatively speaking. Where I really hate it is what it's done to minor league baseball, and I know that was partially coming before the pandemic as well. But those jobs getting pared down, that's not a good thing for our industry because that's the best place to go, as we talked about earlier. What I would tell you and younger broadcasters is you're all in the same boat. So at least there's that. It's not like you're at a disadvantage compared to the other guy who's trying to get the same job you are. You're all going through the same stuff. Be creative about finding ways to keep getting opportunities for yourself. You're clearly doing that. You're doing this right now, So I've always said be creatively aggressive or aggressively creative. However you want to say it in your head, creating opportunities and creating those hands-on reps, even if nobody hears it, it doesn't matter. Every time you practice, you're going to get better. There's no rep too small as you're getting going. And it's a bummer that there aren't more, it's not a smoother path into the industry right now, but everybody's on that same playing field. And there is still a way, I think, to kind of set yourself apart for once they do get that caution tape out of the way and everybody can take off and get after it, trying to get jobs.
That's definitely some great piece of advice there. I wanted to ask you, Joe, as a baseball broadcaster, do you think the game is in a good place right now? I mean, you talk about, the team you've covered, the Dodgers have been around there, but, there's been a lot of teams that have competed with the Dodgers. It's not like the Dodgers are completely dominating the sport like you see in
Yeah.
some of these other sports. I mean, do you think baseball's in a good place right now? What's your take on the game as a broadcaster who gets to call many games both at the network level and with a team like the Dodgers?
I think it's in a good place in that there are a lot of really exciting individual players right now, young stars right now. Francisco Lindor just got traded today to the Mets. That's going to be awesome having Francisco Lindor in New York, Mookie Betts in Los Angeles, Fernando Tatis Jr., Juan Soto, these young guys that are just so electric. I think it's awesome. I think it's been a while since there's been this many wonderful, young, dynamic personalities and players. So that's the good thing. The bad thing is the pace of the game right now and the length of the game and all the pitching changes and missing the head-to-head pitchers duel where the Jack Morris against John Smoltz dueling complete games in the World Series. You don't have that anymore. And with attention spans being shorter than ever, I think that it is something that needs to be fixed. And I think the good thing is that there seems to be a recognition inside the sport that the path that we're headed down, and we're down that path, and headed is probably behind us. We've gone down that path. The path we've gone down is not the best for where the world is in terms of attention span and holding young fans' interest. So hopefully We come up with ways to reel the young audience in and hold the young audience in. And I think that begins just with the first thing I mentioned, those great young talents and personalities who should be attractive to fans.
I know this question might be a little bit out of your pay grade, but is there anything you think baseball can really do to slow down the pace? I mean, the fact is the game itself is just going to be inherently slower than football
Yep.
and basketball, as you know. I mean, do you think there's really tangible stuff baseball can do to really, shrink down the minutes of the game, or is it kind of, you think, a lost cause a little bit?
Yeah, and I probably stated it wrong. I don't even know if the minutes is the biggest issue. It's the pace of play. It's the pace of action. So like 3.5 hour game is too long, yeah. But the bigger issue is the three true outcomes, to nerd out in baseball terms. Too many strikeouts, walks, and home runs, right? You want to see balls in play. You want to see guys running the bases. You want to see diving plays, and you want to see guys' athleticism on display. So whatever we can do to promote that. Been talk of limiting the shift. There's been talk of different rules where you lose the DH if you remove your starting pitcher. Okay, so as soon as you take your starting pitcher out of the game, you lose your DH. So that promotes keeping the starting pitcher in longer. So I think there are a lot of good ideas that have been thrown out there. Baseball is very resistant to change, but anything that they can come up with and put into play. I think we saw some experimental things in this 2020 season that we may not have anticipated enjoying or liking, that prove that the game can evolve, and I think we can get back to a place that is exciting and the pace of play is better.
So you're not opposed to, kind of maybe taking out or changing some of the more traditional stuff in baseball, like shifts and all that. You're, all in favor of maybe incorporating little things here and there that can help improve the pace of the game.
Yeah, I think I'm open-minded to whatever. That's not to say I'd be excited about any of these changes or all of these changes, but I think that we need to be open-minded to any and every idea to keep the health of the game, that we all love, uh, where it needs to be.
For sure. And Joe, you've been so gracious with your time. So I have one final question for you. I mean, where do you think you'll be in 10 years? Is that something you can kind of think about or maybe foreshadow? I mean, you're working for the Dodgers, who are a terrific team. They've got a lot of talent, look to be successful the next couple of years. You're working on the network level with Fox Sports. I mean, seems like you're really enjoying your career and what you're doing right now. Do you think, is there anything you want to do in 10 years, 15 years down the line, some event or something you want to do, or are you just content right now and you're happy with where you're at?
Yeah, I love what I'm doing right now. And when I took the Dodger job, I don't know if I would have said that I envisioned being in it forever, but I would love to do this job forever. So 10 years from now, I'd love to still be doing this. I'd love to still be working with Orel Hershiser, talking him into another 10 years of doing this. And I think that anybody that gets into the national stuff, continue to do those games, and um, the opportunities I'm given, hopefully do them well, and hopefully that continues to lead to bigger and better opportunities on a national scope. I think anybody that tells you they don't care about that is lying. Of course, you always want to do bigger and better games. So, all that said, I can't imagine right now being in a place where I would be happier than doing exactly what I'm doing right now.
Well, Joe, this has been such a pleasure. I really thank you for your time. It's so great to listen to your insights, and best of luck to you as you move on in your career. And again, I'm a big fan of your work. You consummate professional at what you do.
Thank you, Billy, and best of luck to you as you get things going. Okay, better days ahead for all of us, and no different for young broadcasters like yourself.
Amen to that. Thank you so much to Joe Davis, the voice of the Los Angeles Dodgers on television. He also works for Fox Sports, for joining me today. This has been the latest edition of The Pulse with BP. I'm your host, Billy Parvatam. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much.